I'm Jack Oswald, and you're listening.
This is Hudson Hammond, and you're listening to...
I'm Richard C. Hoagland, and you're listening to...
I'm Art Bell, and you're listening to Dr. J Radio Live.
We have an unidentified flying object.
Welcome back to another great episode of Dr. J Radio Live. I'm your host, Dr. J, broadcasting from the City of Angels. As you know, we are internationally syndicated, starting with late night in the Midlands, and of course the U.S. affiliates with that in AM and FM, as well as in the UK Deprogram Radio Network and their AM and FM affiliates. Now today, we bring you two powerhouse guests. Hour two. You all probably know by now, ever since Donald J. Trump has been elected, that I'm pretty outspoken when it comes to being a Republican. Before that, I would hold it back in, so I had to sort of hide it a little bit when I had to get Michael Dukakis back onto the show. So you guys will get a crash course in the DSA, meaning Democratic Socialists of America, plus whatever else he's got to talk about, including Elizabeth Warren possibly making a 2020 run. Hour one, we bring to you an international amazing guest. He's got so much to him. TAPS, the Atlantic Paranormal Society. I've always thought that was a really cool group, and ever since I've been watching Ghost Hunters, I've always enjoyed it on Sci-Fi. For all of these who've missed it, it's been going, I think, for 11 years until it finally ended, but our guest can tell us more about that. So if you haven't seen the promotion, which I'm pretty sure you have, well, then I might as well introduce our guest now, Mr. Grant Wilson. Grant, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. How are you?
I'm doing excellent, as you could see. So, as you know before, I talked about a few things that I wanted to dig in with you, which kind of leads up to who you are today. One thing I also should say is that you are the art director and developer of Rather Dashing Games. If you want to tell us what that is or what kind of games you're involved in, that'd be pretty cool too.
Sure thing, man. I mean, you see me on Ghost Hunters a lot, and I've been investigating the paranormal for 30 years, but there are other sides to me. I've been an artist ever since I could hold a pencil, and so I put that art to good use, illustrating, family-style board games for the company Rather Dashing Games. I helped develop them as well. Our games are, my partner Mike Ritchie and I are, we're avid board gamers, and we love the heavy, crazy games and D&D and all that, but we also like quick, clever games. And so we thought we'd make up games that catered to both the hardcore heavy gamer and the novice gamer who's never really played anything, so that everyone can have a good time playing them. So our games are about less than 5 minutes to learn, less than an hour to play. And they're usually very easy to learn, but difficult to win. So that's what that's all about.
The reason why I asked you about that right off the bat is I guess people will find out this about me. I'm a huge Magic the Gathering player since 1993 when Unlimited came out. And yes, I still got my Power 9, and I still play well, it's not Type 1 anymore. I think it's called Vintage. So I thought that's really interesting. Okay, now I'm going to wind back the clock to when you were 15 years old. And that was something that sort of led to how you worked with Jason Hawes. And for all you out there who have heard that interview on Beyond Reality Radio, he was one of the hosts that I was the guest on. Anyhow, before you'd hooked up to what I'd read about you, Grant, was that one thing that you wanted to talk to him about what was happening to you in the woods on a recurring basis. What happened?
Well, for me, I hadn't really thought too much about ghosts. I was big into UFOs and cryptozoology and conspiracy theories and stuff like that. I hadn't given too much thought to ghosts because the idea that ghosts were kind of all around us kind of made sense to me. It's the way I was raised. But there was the aspects of the paranormal I hadn't really given much thought to. When I was 15, I would go and play or hang out outside with a couple of my best friends. And excuse me, I'm getting over a cold, so I apologize for the cough.
Oh, no problem.
But we were out there in the woods and just kind of hanging around, and I started seeing something like a shimmer in the woods, almost like the Predator's cloaking ability, this kind of distortion. Yes. And my friends couldn't see it, and it was driving me nuts. And eventually it became clearer and clearer. Day after day, we go and hang out there. And I was able to see what this thing was. And I don't like to talk too much about it in too much detail, just because it's very different and very odd. And people look at you like you have three heads, you know? But I didn't choose this to happen. I didn't go looking for it. It just happened. But eventually this thing started mimicking one of my friends, and I had my friend stand behind me. And I proceeded to tell him what he was doing based on the actions of this entity. And that made me feel like I wasn't losing my mind at 15. But when stuff like that happens, you got a logical head, you know, brain in your head, you have to try to find the answer. So this went on for years and years and years and years. And in an attempt to find the answers to what was going on with me, I came across people that were terrified to live in their own homes. And I realized I had to put myself in other paranormal situations to try to learn more about my own situation. So I exchanged comfort for exposure to the paranormal. And, you know, it went from there.
And, you know, we both say we don't choose what happens, but at the same time, Grant, you would have to agree that if it wasn't for that, you wouldn't have gone down that road.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I would have, obviously, I might have been more heavily involved in the UFO stuff or whatever, which is different because when it's UFO stuff, you get, you know, government or men in black guys knocking on your door. With ghosts, you don't really get that much. But I'm grateful for it. I just don't have many answers to my own experiences now, but, you know, thankfully I've been able to help a lot of other people.
Now let's talk about when you first joined TAPS, the Atlantic Paranormal Society. Was that before or after you met Jason Hawes?
So when I met Jay, I was actually starting to make my own websites, and I found his website, and it wasn't the best website. I say that with all due respect. So I called him up and said, hey, this is a subject I'm interested in. I'd be happy to redo your website for free in exchange for me using it in my portfolio. And so we got together and met to talk about the website, but we actually didn't talk much about the website at all. We talked about our shared frustration with the paranormal field and how, you know, there are people charging you money to look at pictures of dust and charlatans out there. And we decided to join forces, and you know, the rest is history.
So what was can you talk about some of the first ghost hunts that you went on? Or here's another twist to it. Did you ever use the skills you had learned as a ghost hunter to go back to the woods?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I've been back several times. Like I said, this stuff penetrated my life pretty fully. I experienced it every day for 2 years until I moved to Italy for a couple of years. I experienced some there. And everywhere I went, it followed me, you know, for the rest of my life. And you know, up to this day, I still have experiences with it, and I'm still trying to figure it out. But yeah, like I said, it turned out to be an aspect of the paranormal that there's very little experience on. And so it was really, really hard to use the skills I had gained. I mean, I used the whole kind of common sense mentality in trying to disprove it and trying to find, you know, as empirical evidence as possible. But it was just really tough. Thankfully I have had people around me experience it. They see the results of it, but they can't see it. For example, they might see the impression of the footsteps, the feet crunching on leaves or knocking on walls, or they'll hear it, see it, but they won't be able to actually see it. And it drives me crazy. Yeah.
And that's one characteristic. That's actually, last night, for all you remember, with Keith Linder talking about the poltergeist at his house and also the ghost that sort of attached to him. Grant, one thing that he was making clear was that when people were around, it's like this ghost would sort of sit back, you know, even when people literally living there. You know, it's where if he's in one area, that's where the action's going to happen. Or you turn your back, that's when a chair or a plant will get thrown across the room, sort of thing. Again, are they just being mischievous is the question, or like you said, there's just so much more to it that we don't understand. And with UFOs, you got something tangible. Here, you don't got much to go on. When you got into ghost hunters, how long after you started researching with Jason before it turned into a television series, Ghost Hunters?
Well, let's see. I think we started around, it was probably about 10 years or so. No more, probably about 12 years later. It wasn't until 2004 that Ghost Hunters aired. And we reconnected around like early 90s. I'm not sure. We always argue on the date. We weren't ever sure when it really happened. But it was early 1990s, like 92 or something like that, around there. So we had been doing it for a while, and it was kind of odd because, as the group grew, Jay and I had investigated together a lot in the beginning, and then it got really, really busy. And so he would be one team lead with a group, and I would take another team to a different case so we could kill two birds with one stone on a weekend. And we had, kind of devised our own investigation techniques, even though they both, agreed with each other. You have your own styles. And then the show starts and they want us together all the time, and we didn't know what to do because our styles were so different. So it was kind of fun in the beginning to try to figure out how to balance each other's style and deal with the whole production crew at the same time.
Here's a question from a listener. Linda Young asks, have you ever taken home a ghost and had to be cleared?
So this is an interesting question. When you're a paranormal investigator, at least for me and those I know, you kind of always have activity going on in your home. But it's really hard to say that it's exactly the same entity you just dealt with. It's really hard to find the identity of an entity to begin with, much less say that the same one is now in your home, to say that it followed you home. But I really don't mind activity in my house. It makes it easier to deal with. You can just sit there in your pajamas and deal with it rather than have to take a 2 or 3 hour ride. But if something follows me home, were to follow me home, it would be because it feels like either it likes me or it hates me, or it feels like I can offer some help. And so I don't see it as an attachment or a parasite as Hollywood would, make us believe, where to me it's like, okay, this thing is really passionate about being with me. Why? And so you try to figure that out. And it's not like a disease you catch at someone's house and now you've got it and you can't get rid of it. More often than not, what you encounter is what we call intelligent human haunting, or a person who's passed on, and that person has free will and desires, ambitions, addictions, whatever. They still have those things. And a person only sticks around something based on their desires. So, someone might stick around me because they think I'm a good guy, or they think I can offer them help, So I don't see it too much as icky as Hollywood would make it. But that stuff does happen,
Before I jump into some more things I personally wanted to ask you, there is Adderike Studios has a question. I guess essentially it's what's next for Grant?
So that's a great question. When I left Ghost Hunters, everyone thought I kind of left paranormal, which was crazy. You can't ever leave it. I don't ever want to leave it. It's I left the rigors of the schedule of Ghost Hunters, but I continue to embrace the paranormal and investigate it, and kind of roll up my sleeves more than ever and try to figure it out. And so I ended up trying to pitch a bunch of shows of various degrees of difference from Ghost Hunters, to try to lift the hood on the paranormal and look deeper into it rather than just run around in the dark more. And I got a lot of resistance. I mean, a lot of people liked what I was teaching, but I think the subjects, they didn't know enough about it to understand that there's a lot to talk about here. And they told me it was too smart for TV. So I finally, after 5 years of that, I said, I talk, with the fans of this genre and this show all the time. I'm usually at at least one event a month, talking to hundreds and thousands of people about the field. And I know what they want. I know they're tired and frustrated with what's on TV and most of it. And, they're not. This is not too smart. They're very intelligent. So I finally said, you know what? Screw it. I'm going to do YouTube. And I'm slowly unraveling my big YouTube plan as I go forward, of doing a live kind of weekly news show every week. And then, talking head videos where I discuss certain topics in depth. And then, well-produced segments outside the studio where I really kind of investigate and talk to the bigwigs out there and get the answers, or at least, further into the questions everyone wants to answer. And I'm not against coming back to TV. It's just got to be the exactly right deal that correlates with my goals. And those goals are to kind of erase the undue fear of the paranormal and replace it with intrigue, and take paranormal investigation, take the investigation out and replace it with exploration. I want to go deeper. I don't want to just say, oh yeah, it's out there. I want to figure out why.
Agreed. And I'm glad you mentioned what they told you from TV. It's too smart for TV, because they really underestimate most people. The listeners listening right now are probably fuming at them because they are intelligent. They're listening right now because they want to know why, or what, or more than is normally presented. So I really think you're going to have some great success with your YouTube channel, because you're in control, and that's the key thing, Grant. Now, let me ask.
Yeah, and you're right. That's the big thing, is that there's no one between me and the fans. We can just do it together. It's beautiful. Sorry, continue.
No. That's actually, I'm glad, because like I said, once it's with your control, you're going to be interacting with them. Some topics you might go into because you're getting the fans talking to you directly. We want more of this. Can you describe that? You'll be happier in every way. I just see it. There's 2 locations I wanted to ask you about before I dive into some other areas that you've been in. And here's one that I wanted to ask about. The Stanley Hotel in Colorado. That is known to be haunted, and you visited it multiple times. What have you seen, if anything at all?
So I've been there, actually. I think I did the total the other day, and it was 26 times I've been there. It's a beautiful location. If you haven't been there, check it out. It's beautiful. I bring my wife there. It's romantic, but it's also very active. Excuse me. And the activity I've experienced there has been positive. People spend a lot of good times there, and that memory to me lingers. It's been very active. Some people have claimed that there's negative stuff there. I just haven't encountered it. There's almost no tragedy on the property. The hotel and the house there, historically, there's almost none. But the experiences you get are, like parties in the ballroom, or children laughing and running up and down the hallways. I've had, every time I've gone there, it's been active. I've had, excuse me, I've had strong interactions with children there. In the concert hall in particular, I've had a lot of experiences. There's one room they call, I forget. There's one room down in the basement, and it's a small little room off the hallway. And you go in there, the door supposedly opens and closes on its own. And I've propped a big, heavy wingback chair in front of it and come and, and heard the door close and slam shut, and come and find the chair moved and the door shut, and gone inside. And I've been in there with about 4 other people, and I turned on my light because I heard something, and the chair, this stackable chair in the middle of the floor, just popped up, flipped up. And yeah, and the poor lady next to me ran out, freaking out, and had to calm her down. We had one part where in the concert hall, there were all these, chairs that are usually set up, but they were all stacked up against the wall. And we brought a group in there during an event, and, Jay and I came back to secure the front doors, and we heard a loud bang, and everyone gasped. And we came in, and one of the chairs had come off the top of this tall stack of chairs and landed next to it, and no one was around it. And, someone said that they had caught it. And sure enough, as they were panning with the video camera, you see this chair lift up and land out on the floor. All sorts of crazy activity. But none of it is bad. It's just active.
Yeah. Between ghosts and ETs, personally for me, because ETs, even though they are probably very advanced at what they can physically do too, especially remote shutting us off, things like that. Yeah. But the mere thought of if I was to encounter with one or the other, obviously there's so much life in this multiverse, I couldn't even fathom what we're not even told about or ideas we don't know about. I still would rather see an alien because I think I would have less fear. How do you feel about that?
So here's the thing. I would absolutely rather interact with an alien. I mean, ghosts and stuff, not only have I had more than my fair share of experiences and interactions, but, when you talk about a ghost of a dead person, like, it's a person, they don't have a body. We don't, the implications of continuance and stuff, it's fascinating. But I find every time I try to talk to them about that side of it, the conversation ends immediately. Now you talk aliens and it's like, okay, there's so much to explore. I'm not a xenophobe at all. I want to hear all about your planet and your customs and your food you eat, and like, take me, show me. Like, I'm not afraid. If the alien landed in my backyard tomorrow, my wife and I would be out there and being like, hey, what can you tell us? What can I do for you? Like, I'm not the kind that would run away.
Yeah, that's a good explanation, and I wouldn't run away either. I think it's just, again, it could be the spirit of someone who passed. Because the mere sight that you can't see them essentially is probably what scares me the most. You hear some noise over there and something's going on behind you too, sort of deal. Okay, before I jump into the other location, which you definitely wouldn't have because you've been there too, but it's specific to my area. Let me go back to the listeners because I can't deny them access to you. It would be wrong. So Alan Evans asks, yeah, that's true. Was it good to work with Amy, Adam, and Josh again?
Oh, it's fantastic. So Amy and Adam are some of my best friends, obviously. And Josh has been a friend for, over a decade. And he's just a great guy. And, when he poses a question on his show, he really wants to find the answer. He's not just a puppet or anything. Like, he's executive producer of that show, and he leaves no stone unturned as far as his abilities and what he can find out. And any chance I have to hang out with him or work with him, I'm always for it. And to work with him, on such a project like The Afterlife was just a treat. It's tough, though, because Josh is so excited about it, but also so kind of afraid of paranormal activity at the same time. Not afraid, but I guess cautious would be more appropriate. The energy is so great because, when I work with Amy and Adam, we've all been doing it for a while, and a ghost could appear and say, my name is Jane. And we'd be like, oh, great, cool. We got the name Jane. Where Josh would be like, whoa, what is that?
Yeah.
And it was a lot of fun, and he's just a good guy, and his team is fantastic. It was great, and he he invited me to come back and film his after show too. So that was doubly great.
And I know I was going to plug in all your stuff near the end. I'm going to give you time for that, but people are asking for the YouTube channel. If you know it already.
My YouTube channel?
Yes.
Yes, it's just youtube.com/TheGrantWilson.
Can't mess that
regular
up.
Grant Wilson wouldn't give it up.
Yeah, of course. That's true, right? Unless you have spent a certain amount of money, I would think that would be the case. But nonetheless, the other location I wanted to ask you about, the Queen Mary, RMS Queen Mary, my little backyard boat here.
That's a great place. I mean,
yes.
Again, a place that I've been to multiple times. And it just doesn't get old. You get on that ship and it feels like you're going back in time.
Oh, yeah.
You stay in the staterooms and it's got the saltwater taps and all this stuff. And it was interesting on Ghost Hunters where we had some activity there. And then we found that one of the pieces of footage, Dave Tango was so astute to realize that someone had manipulated the footage and tried to mess with us. Now, of course, everybody on the team was upset by that and thought the Queen Mary was messing with us and trying to be on TV, just, faking everything. And, I remember having a conversation with them, like, guys, calm down. This is somebody messed with us. That doesn't negate everything that's ever happened on the ship or the ship at all. We have to give them a fair investigation. And we did. And I've since been back and had amazing experiences. If I could share one with you, it would be great. There was
absolutely, yeah, please do.
We were doing an event, and after hours, we were able to go into the pool area, which has recently been closed for renovation. I guess it wasn't, the safest place. But when we were there, it was fine and open. And there were, I would say, less than 10 of us in the pool area, and we were using the K2 meter, which is just a kind of easy-use EMF detector. Excuse me, man. And we were having great communication with it. So we would teach the entity to use as a yes or no question device. It light up for yes and don't light up for no. And we got this, I take it all with a grain of salt, but we were apparently talking to a little girl. And we would ask these control questions, and she would get them right every time. And the answers were spot on and immediate. And as we were talking to her, the questions would be interrupted with this rhythm on the lights. They would light up in a rhythm. And then, of course, everybody's looking at their cell phones, and we had all turned them off because it was late at night anyway. And we just couldn't figure out what it was. And then I was sitting there watching it, and the rhythm of the lights were going, and I realized that it was to the tune of London Bridge is Falling Down.
Oh,
so I asked, I said, hey, do you want us to sing London Bridge is Falling Down? And the lights went crazy. And so we all were like, okay, and we sang it, and as we're singing it, the lights were going in rhythm with us, right? Wow. And then we come to My Fair Lady, right? And it went off, and it was done. No more communication. That was it.
It sounded like that ghost wanted to, obviously just interact to be felt alive in some way. Did you get that sort of impression with that ghost?
Yes. I mean, think of it, it's not spooky at all. It's a child, and maybe they haven't heard that song in forever. Maybe they forgot how it goes, or maybe they forgot the words, and it was driving them nuts, or maybe they were lonely, and mom used to sing that all the time. But it gets better. Later, like I think it was a year later or so, even further, I was at the Stanley Hotel in an event, and a woman came up to me and said, hey, I want to play you this EVP. Listen to it. So I'm like, okay, and I listened, and you can hear a little girl singing London Bridge is Falling Down. And I said, where did you catch this? And she said, in the pool area at the Queen Mary. And my head exploded, and I went later, I was at the Queen Mary, and I told the lady about this story who runs the tours and stuff, and she's like, oh, yeah, we've got, X number of reports of that song being sung there. And it's just like, wow, awesome stuff.
So clearly this ghost has been occupying that one area for a long time. And the pool area is very famous because I know a lot of things lead into that. Unsolved Mysteries has talked about that. Heck, when I was there last time, I asked a waiter, have you ever seen or heard anything? He said, yeah, he was in the pool area. He heard splashing, and then he looked, and it looked like somebody was walking out of the pool. He could see like the footsteps, but saw nothing. Yes. And they're very casual about that. Oh, I saw that or heard that, because like you said, it's a regular occurrence, Now, you just talked about some benevolent cases. Let's switch to the whole spectrum now, Grant. Anything that you've done in your entire life. Let's talk about any malevolent cases that you might have been involved in, researching for yourself, for ghost hunters, or just in the Atlantic Paranormal Society. Anything goes.
Well, there's a lot of that. And I'm not saying that there's a lot of it out there, but I've encountered a lot of it, and I have a great amount of experience with it. More often than not, people are going to encounter like a residual haunting or a dead person, an intelligent haunting. But there's a small chance that you'll encounter what we call inhuman, which can be positive, like angels, some people call them, negative, which could be like demons, some people call them, and then there's elementals, which are kind of indifferent, or fairies and that type of stuff. Now, when you talk about the negative stuff, I just have to say it before I get too into it, that on TV and in Hollywood, it's portrayed as if these things are everywhere, and they just kind of sit in a box and wait for you to open it, and then they jump on you, and now you're infected with a demon. Like, you have no choice in the matter, and that's simply not how they work. There are negative intelligent entities. They're just people who are jerks that will do stuff. But then when it comes to true negative stuff, yes, it's out there, but it's not the way it's portrayed on TV. So I just have to get that out there.
Yeah, no, I believe it because they scare cells.
Yeah, they're like, oh, we had to burn down the house. Well, the negative entity would just follow you out of the house. It's not changing the house.
Wow.
The negative entity stuff is it's kind of like a lion chasing a gazelle. It's this entity that preys on the weak and the sick. So if you're addicted to anything, you're obsessed with anything, you're doing anything kind of jail-worthy, this thing is more likely to come to you and try to separate you from your support group and wear your will down to the point where it can hurt you or use you to hurt somebody else. And the key is to catch it before it gets past a certain point. So when I go into a house and it's negative, getting rid of it is easy. Religious provocation for some reason works every time. And I think that's probably because, you never feel more empowered than when you think God and the whole universe is on your side. But keeping it away is hard because it involves changing somebody's lifestyle. You hear these cases about, we did an exorcism of a house 5 times and it kept coming back. Well, that's because you're taking aspirin for cancer. Like, you have to get to the core of the problem and change that person or the person around them's lifestyle so that they're not tasty to these entities anymore. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
But I've dealt with. I don't like to get too in specific because then people get curious and they end up drawing these things in. So, I've dealt with. I remember one case in Italy. There was a 9-year-old girl that her family called me in, and they believed she was possessed. I came in with some friends, and this 9-year-old girl sounded like a 45-year-old smoking man, and body was contorting. The pupils were fully dilated. Foam around the edge of the mouth, and she was throwing around furniture that would have been difficult for me to throw around. Now, I'm not a big guy. I'm like 5'9", but still a 9-year-old girl. And, it took 4 grown men to subdue her. We had her on the ground, and each person was on like a limb, and we didn't want to hurt her, still frail 9-year-old body. And I did my thing and, pushed it out, and she fell asleep and stayed asleep for 2 days.
Wow.
And come to find out later, her older sister was getting involved with some cults and black magic and things she shouldn't be doing. And in those circles, the rules of possession are weird because this 9-year-old girl was the older sister's younger sister. Then the older sister had possession over her and could use her in certain rituals. And that's exactly what was happening. And needless to say, we made it very clear what this older sister was doing, and it was clear this was bad stuff in her eyes, and she stopped and thankfully changed her life, and this didn't bother them anymore. That's an example of what
she didn't recognize what she was doing to her own sister as far as influence-wise with playing with the occult, that her sister was having some effect. She didn't put 2 and 2 together until you said it, essentially?
She actually wasn't home when this all went down. She was out doing this stuff. So she expected was, okay, my sister will, she didn't know that this type of thing was going to be the effect of what she was doing.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Now,
she didn't know that her sister was going to be flipping around like that.
Oh, yeah. Especially what you described, a 9-year-old sounding like a 45-year-old smoker. That right there, it's like, Something ain't right with this picture. Now, this actually ties into something that I wanted to ask you anyhow before we got on the air, which was that one case you were working on, or at some point you were held down in a town because of black magic. So I figure if we're talking about the occult use, let's segue into that real quick and just give us the background and what happened.
That's actually happened more than once. So I hope I addressed the right one.
Yeah, you did, definitely.
There is a case, and I don't like to get too specific on the details, obviously, but there was a woman whose home, she thought was haunted, called us in, and while we were investigating, we found a secret room in her basement with an altar in it and occult symbols all over the walls. And that room then had a secret tunnel off the side that went off to a place where people could park. So people could park, come in, and do rituals on this woman in her house. Fun, right? And so
seriously.
The landlords own that house and just about every house on the street, but most of the houses were empty, and they came and visited us, visited the homeowner kind of late at night, asking who we were and what was going on, and she just kept saying we were friends. And then, stuff started getting real crazy, and it was about 3 a.m., which is a bad time for this stuff. And, we packed up and left. And as we pulled out, all these other cars pulled out of these supposedly empty houses, following us in a snowstorm. And the cop tried to pull us over, and we said, no, thank you. And we took off and actually drove in the opposite direction for a while. And, pulled out the old tire irons waiting for these guys to show up, and they didn't, thankfully. Yeah. But that's one of the stories. There's another one where this trailer park, everyone's pets were going missing, and we knew what was up, but we had to prove it. And so we figured it was, black magic, occult stuff, trying to go out there and summon stuff using pets and things as proxy for the actual people. And Jay and I went out into the woods with our video cameras, and sure enough, we found them doing their rituals, and I forgot to cover up the little red light on my video camera.
Oh. And
they spotted me and started coming towards me, and I quickly, ejected the tape and put another one in. And as they approached, I just said, hey, I wouldn't mess. There's about 30 of us searching through the woods for this dog. We've all been missing pets. We're trying to figure out what's going on. And he demanded the tape, which I gave him, which was not the real tape. And, we got out of there, thankfully, by lying about how many of us there were.
Yeah, of course. I would think so. Now,
and these are summaries. I mean, there's more to these cases, but...
Oh, I'm sure we could spin one case if we had the time and probably go into detail without even giving the details that you're trying to protect the people. And I still think that would take 30 minutes to an hour, depending on how much will happen there, because there's so much, as you just said. Now, here's something sort of, I guess, in the middle for some people, but clearly other people would just put it in one category. The Ouija board. A lot of people say you mess around with the Ouija board, you're opening the door to demonic influence, if that's the term you're using. But other people who are ghost hunters, probably not to the extent you are and people but maybe just, I guess, beginners, I would hate to hesitate the term amateurs, say, hey, I use the Ouija board to contact the other side all the time. What's your take on that?
So here's the thing. With Ouija boards, I mean, there's nothing magical about the board. The companies don't inject a spirit into the board. It's just a board. And some of them are very beautiful. It's a part of our history, and they're works of art. I know Bob Murch has a great collection of Ouija boards, and it's beautiful. And it's not the board per se that bothers me. It's the fact that using a tool that requires you to sacrifice some of your free will for it to work is a slippery slope. That's a dangerous thing for me. Like when I use a K2 meter, I click it on and I put it down. Yeah. It doesn't require me to have a ghost use my thumb to click it, or, I'm not asking the entity to use me as a speaking vessel. Like, I don't recommend any technique that forces you or requires you to sacrifice free will for it to work. That being said, most people don't have a Ouija board and don't have a problem with a Ouija board until they have a problem with a Ouija board. You know?
Yeah, that's true. That's very
just
true.
Be like, nothing went wrong. It's fun, and then bam. So I'm not saying using it and using it successfully doesn't mean that only a devil can use it or a demon can use it. It's just that sacrifice of will basically is putting that fishing lure out there for a negative entity, saying, I'm willing to give up my will, which is what they want you to do. Does that make sense? That's how they work.
Because if you give up your will, you're in their control.
Right, and you're basically advertising that I'm willing to do it, and you just never know if it's really dead Uncle Fred talking to you through that Ouija board. You just don't know who it is. And honestly, most of the negative cases that I've come across, there's been a Ouija board on site. Now, that could be coincidental, but, you don't need it. You don't need it. You want to talk to your grandfather and you hope that he's there or whatever, or you miss somebody, or you just want to have a spooky experience. Just treat them like people. Get your voice recorder out and go for it. And, if dead Uncle Fred doesn't come back and talk to you, it's either because he can't, doesn't want to, or maybe it's painful and hard for him to do it. And then you have to ask yourself, if it's harmful for my dead Uncle Fred to come back and talk to me, is it worth doing? And, of course, the answer is no.
Of course. I mean, even if it's someone's past, you don't want any harm to come to them in any way, especially since we don't really know what's there. That's the biggest thing that people forget to realize. They may not be with us right now, but what are they actually going through if these are the spirits of them? Now, there's been a few people that I've had on the show that can actually see dead people. Jennifer Malik is a current one. She also hosts a show with her husband. And also there is Mark Anthony, the psychic lawyer, and Robbie Thomas, the psychic medium criminal profiler. And one question I asked him, I said, do these people, when they pass, do you literally, because what he does is he profiles what happened by seeing what happened literally. And I said, when you see these dead souls, I said, are they in the shape that they were murdered? And he said, yes. That would kind of destroy me, seeing a, body chopped up or whatever. Now, have you ever heard of anything like that? Or is this sort of unique to these people? Or what's your take on that?
So I can't see them like that, thankfully. It would make my job easier if I could, but, God bless those people. That must be a burden to bear. But, I've heard different things. Obviously, psychics, they tend to put a stronger emphasis on the difference between ghost and spirit than maybe an investigator would. For them, a ghost is someone who has not passed on, where a spirit has, and once it comes back to talk to you, whatever, that it's spirit, it's taking care of its business. And usually in that form, at least what I gather from the psychics I know and the mediums I know, that they're not in their harmed state. They're happy and whole. But when they're in the ghost state before they move on, they can be in any number of situations. They're typically exactly how they pictured themselves. And a lot of people say that that's it. They present the image that they're most familiar with. But he might be in a more of a unique situation here. I don't know. For me, I don't think that, the clothes you die in are the clothes you have for eternity. I don't believe that. But I think it's more of a mental state.
Yes. I would personally think if what you die in, you actually might be something that you're happy with or something like that, right?
Well, I don't know. I just don't know. Maybe if you're taken suddenly, you might be in the clothes you died in. If you're taken suddenly, you don't even realize you're dead. I think it's a point of realization. The more you realize what's going on and the more you accept it, and, the more you let go of what you have here on earth, it probably reflects the way you look. I just don't know. I've seen everything. I've seen full body apparitions that look as real as you and me. I've seen shadow people. I've seen half people. I've seen see-through people. But the one thing I get from them, which I find is fascinating consistently, is I tend to want to ask them what we look like to them. And the answer I always get for me is that we typically look like shadows to them, black shadows.
Interesting.
Which could explain a lot of their behavior. Yeah.
Very
and knowing that
interesting.
helps me place equipment differently. You know, a lot of investigators sit in a circle with all their equipment in the middle, and they're asking an entity to come in the middle of that bear trap of black shadows to manipulate the equipment. And you get better success if you put the equipment near a doorway they could just peek in, you know, if you're far away from the door. And it changes the way you look at things when you think, man, maybe they're just as scared of us as we are of them, you know.
Oh, absolutely. And this, what you just said, I'm still actually dwelling on that because that makes so much sense, because I know in a lot of cases you've seen all this range, but I know I just never could understand how shadow people can be there unless that's what their form was in general. So if they sometimes appear as shadows to us, if we appear to shadows at them, that would make a huge difference in me understanding it. So I'm really glad you mentioned that. Very, very interesting.
Great.
Now, here's another thing too, Grant, is through your entire life, my guess is the more you researched, the more you thought you had a handle on, you probably had even more questions than you started, huh?
Oh, of course. And it's funny because you start to kind of become secure in it. You know, the more you do something, the more knack you have for it, anything in life. And paranormal investigation is no different. But recently, over the past couple of years, I've thought, you know what? I've got my head wrapped around this. I'm not saying I know all the answers, but I can understand dead people still living and treat them like people. Like I can do it. I usually do most of my casework over the phone. I don't have to actually go there because I just have that experience. And so what I did was I was like, okay, dead people makes a lot of sense. I'm going to do a mental exercise, and I'm going to close that idea in a box and shelve it and remove it as a reason or an explanation for what these phenomena are, and try to force myself to think outside the box, because I've had experiences that don't quite fit in that box. And I tell you, you know, if people do that, if investigators start doing that, amazing things start to happen in your mind. And you're not eliminating that when you're helping the client, but when you're just having a mental exercise, you remove that. You know, what can it be? You know, temporal anomalies. Are we seeing shadows of people in the future or the past? Or, you know, global consciousness. Are we all connected? And our experience, our shared experience, everything I've learned and experienced as a person is being stored somewhere in a global consciousness, a stored facility that is accessible by every other living being or self-organizing system, you know. So when a psychic is talking to dead Uncle Fred, is he really talking to dead Uncle Fred, or is he talking with dead Uncle Fred's file of shared experiences that he's ever had? You know, is dead Uncle Fred out cruising the cosmos and we're just talking to him? Because think about it, if there was a file that was all my experiences of things I've learned and experienced, it wouldn't be a stack of papers. It wouldn't be a movie. It would be me. And I would answer correctly based on what I've learned in my life. And so maybe sometimes when we're investigating that, we tap into that somehow. We don't know how. Maybe that's what psychics are tapping into. Who knows? So the mind starts to wander, and it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I would think so. And by doing that exercise, when you just wanted to look at it from the point, are we not dealing with non-humans here? This reminds me of what you just said at the very beginning of the show when you talked about elementals. Is that sort of when you realized there were elementals, or did you already know when you did this exercise?
So I had already kind of come to the conclusion that my original experience dealt with what we call elementals, just because they don't look human at all. They were usually smaller, and I didn't feel particularly, blessed by them. So I didn't consider them angels, and I didn't feel threatened by them. It was just that indifference of just like, oh, hey, here you are. And the communication, if I had any, you know, it wasn't necessarily like they were talking to me, and it was just very confusing. That it made almost no sense. So it couldn't be a person, and there was physical interaction, and so when I thought, what the heck are these things? My first thing was, well, they don't look human, so maybe they're negative, but there was no negative connotation at all to them. And I've had experience with that a lot, and I can recognize it. And then I thought, okay, maybe they're aliens, and that's still not necessarily off the table, but not, the Greys coming down, a UFO type of alien, but something else. I don't know. So the best result was, okay, maybe it's this elemental type stuff that pretty much every culture on the earth talks about in their ancient history. And it's tough, though, because to research it, you literally have to read fairy tales. And those were stories where what may have been real accounts of these things had been twisted and turned, into tales to scare children or people from going in the woods and into behaving properly, which one could make the argument that the same thing has been done with the Bible, that these tales have been twisted to get us to behave properly. But maybe I'm overstepping my bounds. But
no, you're actually not. Let me tell you why, Grant. Is one thing Eric Von Daniken, a dear friend of mine, says off the record, which I made him say on the record last time, is that the people who were first writing were like the aristocrats, priests. If they weren't writing facts, they would be beheaded in a heartbeat by the kings and queens and pharaohs, whatever were at the time. So why would you write if you started writing and you're one of the few in that civilization that can do so? Are you going to write what's actually happening, or are you going to create this long fiction? I would tend to think that you would write what's actually happening, and later down the line it could be distorted. So you talked about the Bible. The book of Ezekiel is full of things that, if you look at it literally, well, it pretty much sounds like he was dealing with something non-human. So I agree with what you said, Grant, 100%.
Yeah, and I mean, you think about it, if you go back far enough in time, like obviously the resources to write stuff down were very limited. And so, yes, it was very important, everything that was written down. But honestly, if you're one of these people that could write, you're sitting right next to the king or whoever, or the pharaoh, and I don't necessarily think you're going to write so much fact as just what the king wants you to write, because he'll probably cut your head off if you write something else. But yeah, I mean, for me, I've always taken Holy Scripture and stuff with a grain of salt. I mean, we know it's been changed. There's a King James version. We tried to bring it all back. We know that. And so I think what we have to do is look at the general sense. Like, if you were to do a book report on the Bible, what would you basically say? Okay, well, we're supposed to treat each other better, I mean, that's the key of what we're trying to get out of it. And it's when people look at it under a microscope that it gets a little crazy, and that's what wars are fought over. Instead of just like, okay, let's meet somebody. Let's look at the common denominator. Okay, treat other people the way you want to be treated. Anything above that is gravy. If we can just all do that, let's focus on that instead of killing each other because your God is better than my God, and it just drives me crazy.
I'm glad you brought up the golden rule, and I'll try to make this as quick as I can. But if we could build off that one rule, I'm all the 10 Commandments essentially are from that. And if you really think about it, the 10 Commandments, every law is built around that in some sort of way. As a lawyer, I could look at it and say that. Okay, because we're coming close to time, I'm getting calls, Grant, here for a story that sticks out in your head that was not on Ghost Hunters. And I'm sure there's a ton, that's for sure. So anyone you want, doesn't matter what the topic or what it was that happened or where. It doesn't matter if it's benevolent, malevolent, or in between. What would you say for what one?
Okay. Well,
not your favorite either, just anyone.
Oh, well, there's one that's my favorite because it brings home the importance of my favorite piece of equipment, the audio recorder. And it's just a great example of the good that can be done with the paranormal. So if the people out there have heard it before, I apologize, but I'm going to say it again. This is a story. We were doing a case in New York City in this brownstone house, like they had on the Cosbys. And the family had lived in this house for 3 generations. And she was having paranormal activity, and we were there investigating. And down in the basement, we kept getting this EVP, this voice, this name Beatrice. It kept saying Beatrice. And after the 3rd or 4th time, we went up to the homeowner and said, okay, who's Beatrice? What's this name? And she had no idea what we were talking about. So she called her mother, who didn't live there anymore, said, "Mom, who's Beatrice?" Mom had no idea, but suggested she call Grandma in the home. And so she called Grandma, and Grandma said, "Beatrice, where did you hear that name?" And we're all like, "Oh, here we go." And then she said, the homeowner said, "Well, the guys are here investigating, and they keep getting this name." And the grandmother said, "Well, maybe it's time. Go upstairs on the second floor in the closet, about 2 feet off the floor, you'll see a patch in the wall. Break that open and you'll have your answers." Okay. So I'm all about breaking holes in the walls. I went up there, got permission, obviously, broke a hole in the wall, and we found a leather-bound journal that belonged to this homeowner's grandfather. And we start reading it, and he was clearly involved in organized crime, and this is where he wrote down everything that he had done to get it off his chest. And sure enough, here comes the name Beatrice, and he falls in love with Beatrice, but he was married, so he's got a mistress named Beatrice, and he gets her pregnant, and she was going to quote unquote squeal, was the term he used, and so he had his guys throw her in a pit in the basement and cement it over. So at this point, you got to know when to stop. We called the police, we told them the story, we gave them the book, showed them where we found it, and we weren't allowed to be there, but they opened it up, and we solved a 60-year-old missing person case with an EVP.
Wow.
Fascinating stuff.
That,
yeah.
I would think that, I could see why it's your favorite, because not only were you investigating something that you love, you were able to help the world and clear, for family's sake and anybody who was tied to the victim, have answers. 60 years, that's a long time. If more people like you can do this, then I think we would actually be in a better place instead of us just waiting for DNA, because sure, it helps, but we need everything sort of clear because a lot of people are suffering. Unfortunately, folks, we are out of time with Grant. Remember, Michael Dukakis is the second hour, so do enjoy him. Tomorrow, we will have 2 more guests for you. I'm still working on one because we had a cancellation, but Joel Skousen, the InfoWars World Affairs expert, will be back. He will be doing once a month here, giving us some world affairs, which is definitely needed considering what is happening in the world. But before we go, Grant, I wanted to give you an opportunity to plug in whatever you want. Well, you talked about the YouTube channel. For anyone who joined in late, you might as well spit that out again. Anything that you want people's attention to after the show.
Absolutely. And honestly, that's where it's going to be at, is the YouTube channel. YouTube.com/TheGrantWilson. My show is called What the Fetch. It's a lighthearted look into the paranormal and all aspects of it. And Wednesday nights at 9, my wife and I do our live show, What the Fetch Weekly, where we just chat about the news with everybody. That's where you're going to see me. That's where you're going to see the most of me. And probably where you're going to see the parts of me you like the best, me talking about weird stuff. So YouTube.com/TheGrantWilson.
Excellent. And I hope everyone out there does watch it. I know I will too, and interacts with Grant. He's a really cool guy. And at the same time, you might get your questions answered, which is key. We are all truth seekers here, and that is the goal. Remember, folks, stick around for Michael Dukakis and join us again live tomorrow, 7 p.m. Eastern. For those of you in the UK, midnight a.m. I guess it wouldn't be quite Wednesday for you. It would technically be Thursday. With that being said, folks, stay tuned for the break. And like I said, the Duke, Governor Dukakis, when we come back.